Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank Peter and his colleagues for asking me to come along here and talk to you about how in the UK we've been using regulatory tools to manage medication errors, which we've identified with the help of David and his colleagues at the National Patient Safety Agency. So I'm going to run very quickly through what the provisions and objectives are of the regulations and look at the guidance we produced to help minimise errors with packaging issues. Look at some key findings and some examples from practice. Now, the directive that we work with is a single market directive, but there are some crumbs of comfort alluding to patient safety within it around the fact that the information that's provided should provide a high degree of consumer protection and that ultimately we end up with a safe product in the marketplace. In 2001, our Department of Health had been given targets on reducing medication errors in clinical practice, and the Committee on Safety of Medicines at the time established a working group to look at medication errors and in particular what contributed to that in the regulatory environment and what we could do to improve this so that medication errors could be reduced going forward. The key findings from the working group, which was looking principally at labelling because it was identified that labelling contributed hugely to medication errors. One of the key findings was that there's no substitute for clinical staff actually reading the label, but from a regulatory perspective, we need to enable them to do that readily. And from that, it became apparent that certain pieces of information were absolutely essential for the safe use of the product. Remember, there are some 16 items of information that go onto a label, but not all of those are critical at the point of use. How the information is presented on the pack is important. And of course, similarity in packaging was a key issue in confusion, misselection, and medication error. Look-alike and sound-alike names, Anne-Marie's already alluded to, but the bottom line was that within the regulatory framework, many improvements could be put in place to reduce error. If we just look quickly at the critical information that CSM identified, those were the name of the product and, importantly, the common name of the drug within the product, the strength, the route of administration, and occasionally the dosage and the warnings were essential at the point of use. The CSM agreed on a number of principles that should be applied to packaging components. Those pieces of critical information which I've just shown should be located together on the pack in the same field of view. Clinical staff shouldn't have to rotate packaging to find the information they need at the point of use. It needs to be presented in as large a font as possible. And importantly, for storage purposes, the name of the medicine should appear on 3 non-opposing faces of the pack, so that however it's stored in a pharmacy, it's obvious what the medicine is. Prescribing in the UK is done largely by generic name, so the common name needs to be given due prominence on the packaging. An innovative pack design will aid all those in the supply chain identify and administer medicines, and innovative pack design can be achieved by the judicious use of colour on the pack. So if we look at some examples of problem packaging, corporate identity, clearly important for the pharmaceutical industry, doesn't help clinicians identify products safely at the point of use. Diamorphine products, again, strong corporate image. If the wrong strength is selected, an opiate-naive patient could suffer dire consequences. This is slightly better, but again, we're talking here about an opiate. The strengths are not well differentiated one from another because of poor contrast, colour contrast between text and background. Perhaps less of an issue, but even so, another strongly similar packaging. I've lost count of the number of errors that I've reported to the EMA about these products. Now, you might say these packs look very different, and yes, they do. But the issue here is around the prescribing through the generic name. The generic names of these 2 products are very similar, and they are almost invisible on these packs. It's not enough, as David said earlier, just to tick the box and say the information is there. We need to look at it in the round and see how this impacts use in practice. We're still getting errors. I had one of this reported to me only the other day. It's still happening. We know corporate identity is important, but packaging can be redesigned to retain an identity and yet introduce safer packages. And in considering how to redesign the packaging, we need to consider how will the medicine be stored? Will they be stored alphabetically? Will they be stored in a fridge? Will medicines be co-prescribed? Because errors occur not just in hospitals and pharmacy settings, but also in the home when patients are taking medicines together. We need to see differentiation both between products, but also between strengths within a product range. And to help pharmacists who no longer count tablets on a triangle and see the medicine, we need the name above the space where we're going to apply the dispensing label. So if we take those factors into account in redesigning packs, we can actually make quite a difference. Here are some packs that we've recently been working on in the UK. There's a strong corporate image here, and yet each of the medicines is well differentiated one from another, and the strengths are also differentiated. We have a nice, tidy, well-ordered back of pack with all the information appearing in the same place from the same company. This is a different corporate range, but again, you can see the same issues apply. Strong, large fonts for the drug names and products differentiated by colour. Again, a good back of pack with information set out in the same way. This is a different range again, but you can see that very quickly a corporate image can be achieved and yet provide clear packaging. Sorry, I just want to go back one. How do I do that? What have I done now? There we go. Sorry. So those are examples of packs where redesign has achieved better selection in the pharmacy. I'm now going to show you some of the things that we've worked on specifically on case examples which have arisen through errors and fatalities that have been reported either to us in the MHRA or through the National Learning and Reporting System of the NPSA. In 2003, we did have an issue with a small child accessing their mother's ferrous sulfate tablets with fatal consequences. And this got quite a lot of press coverage. We did two things with this packaging. We put a warning on the front of the pack alerting parents to the fact that if a child did get hold of this, an overdose could be fatal. But in addition, we also put child-resistant packaging requirements into our national legislation. And there are two international standards for child-resistant packaging, but there are no requirements unless these are put into national provisions for medicines to be packaged in these types of packs. One of the first cases we worked on was the vincristine issue. There had been over a number of years intrathecal administration of vinca alkaloids which caused fatality. And in 2001, the case that occurred in the UK at that point resulted in the establishment of the National Patient Safety Agency and the work that David and his colleagues took forward thereafter. Our action through the regulatory framework was to change the way the packaging was set out. So we removed negative statements from the pack. The pack had previously said not for intrathecal use, and clearly there were subliminal messages being given out from that, clinicians then using the wrong route. So we have positive statements only on packs. All the information that clinicians need is in the same field of view. And alongside the work that we did on the regulatory front, there was clinical guidance produced so that those involved in administering vincas now make them up into much larger volumes, which cannot be given through the IT route. Anne-Marie talked about tall man lettering, and as a result of errors with cephalosporins, The packaging of cephalosporins in the UK has tall man lettering applied so that it's very easy for pharmacists and their staff to identify the correct cephalosporin in the pharmacy. We've already heard about methotrexate, but the work that we did in the UK was some very long time ago. We introduced take the prescribed dose once a week on the front of pack in 2004 to reduce the errors that had been occurring here. And it's good to see that there's now a harmonised position across all member states with methotrexate warnings. IV solutions containing potassium now all have a red K on the front, and that was quite difficult to achieve with the bag presentations, which are printed by heat sealing onto the bag. The infusion bags are otherwise all identical, and it was very easy for clinical staff to pick up a potassium-containing IV bag rather than a non-potassium bag without that red writing on it. So it's simple things like this that can actually make a big difference in practice. Phil spoke about the fentanyl issue, which was identified through our yellow card scheme. And on the packaging, we could only address some of the issues that we had with the fentanyl. So we've put information on about making sure patients remove the old patch before they apply the new one, and making sure that they don't cut or divide the patch. But in the patient leaflet, we've put in additional information there about not using heat pads, electric blankets and hot water bottles and so on, and also helping patients more readily understand when they needed to change the patch by putting in a table. So those are just some of the things that we've done in the UK over the years to amend packaging to help people reduce the likelihood of error. But we've worked with a lot of other stakeholders along the way. Our guidance was published first in 2003 and has recently been revised. But we worked with the National Patient Safety Agency, we've worked with the TGA in Australia, with Canada, and of course with our colleagues here at the European Agency. The issues are global, they're not local. And although we do need to do things on a local basis, we do need to think more globally about what these issues are. Labelling is always implicated in error. If we look at the reference data, labelling comes very high up the list. And the primary purpose of the labelling is the clear and unambiguous identification of the product and the conditions for its safe use. But we saw from our research that only certain critical items were vital for the safe use of the product. All the information must be there in a legible and easily understood manner, and there is much more that can be done within the regulatory framework we have. Innovative pack design can go a long way to improving patient safety and reducing the likelihood of error. I've focused this morning just on packaging and labelling issues. There's a huge issue to do with patient information, which would take up another conference in its own right. And getting good information to patients and healthcare professionals is critical. There is more we need to do on the broader information side, and I'm encouraged that the shortcomings report that the Commission is working on with Nivelle in the Netherlands will hopefully address some of the deficiencies with the information in general. But I think within the framework we have, there is quite a lot that we can do to help clinicians and patients use their medicines safely just through packaging changes.